Kung Fu Panda 1, masterpiece. Kung Fu Panda 2, well, before I talk about this movie, let me tell you guys something. Growing up, I watched most animated movies. But it wasn't until I went to the dentist one time and they were playing Cars on a TV screen they had above me. And as they were cleaning my teeth, I just remember thinking, wow, I like this. Eventually, I watched Despicable Me. I thought to myself, oh my god, I really like my childhood movies. I later watched Kung Fu Panda, loved it. So a while later, I watched Kung Fu Panda 2. And keep in mind that I didn't have a lot of experience critiquing movies at the time. But I remember thinking that most of the movie was just Poe and the Furious 5 fucking around in some city. I didn't like it that much. But watching it today fresh off Kung Fu Panda 1, I now see the movie clearly. While there is some truth to my original thoughts, flaws of this movie are rooted at the foundation. Let's just look at the first scene with Poe. So we get this shot of two kids playing with toys and then we hear banging. Presumably it's the five training, but it's actually Poe stuffing dumplings in his mouth. And Tigers is like,
your training has paid off.
But the problem with this scene is that it just doesn't add anything to anything. Like, what is the purpose of this scene other than being funny? So stay with me. Poe then gets called to Shifu, and when he gets there, Shifu is instantly doing this water drop thing. So they start talking about inner peace, and we get this joke where Shifu is just explaining his arc in the first movie while insulting Poe. This shit is... Wait.
Not actually contradicting his previous stance. Attention, funny joke that also does not undermine the character.
Yeah, that, but like in reverse. It's such a predictable joke that isn't clever at all, and it's so out of character for Shifu. Now obviously these are problems, but what I want to emphasize is that this movie is at its core flawed. These mistakes are not just random. They're all a result of the way this movie was written. This and the third movie were not directed by the same people who did the first movie. And that honestly explains a lot. Not only in the lesser quality, but this movie feels a lot more focused on being a kid's movie. There's so many moments that you can tell were only put in to please younger audiences. Many changes made to make this movie more traditionally appealing. An example being the side characters.
Hey, maybe you can't watch me be killed?
Stop being a wimp.
They fucked it up. I've already talked about how the first movie does a great job painting a full picture by implying meaning. The Furious 5 weren't the focus of the first movie by any means, but they serve their purpose. But in this movie, they're just weak-ass joke machines. Tigress is the only one that isn't extremely shallow, but is also still kind of ruined. First movie, you could tell exactly how she felt and why she felt that way. But in this movie, they try to give her more personality, and it's just... I'm sorry, guys. It was weak. Basically, she's the hardcore warrior, but while it might seem like she's just hardcore, she actually does have feelings and understands Poe. But then goes back to being hardcore, but she loses hope, but then it works out, and by the end, she's like, that was pretty hardcore. And it's like, stop saying hardcore. Please. I think the problem that stands out to me the most is that this movie feels rushed. And not in the sense that they didn't have enough time to make it, but in that they didn't do a good job of fitting the story into a 90-minute limit. There's so many moments in this movie that are simply not set up well. Remember the third scene when Shifu almost randomly brings up inner peace? And it's the first time Poe's hearing about it, apparently? Well, a few scenes later, they learn of Shen, so Shifu sends them to stop him, and Poe's like, wait, how can I do this? And Shifu flat out says anything is possible with inner peace. Bro, it's just like, whatever. And then also, Shifu doesn't even go with them. And it's like, bruh, if we're talking about Kung Fu itself being on the line, why? Well, there's literally no reason for it. He's kind of just not in the movie, and then at the end, he comes back. He says, Poe, incredible that you found inner peace. And Poe's like, I had a great teacher. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? He wasn't in the movie. You have this moment where this bull guy is like, Kung Fu is dead. It's just so unimpactful. It's like, okay, thank you. There's also a lot of moments where the movie instantly moves on to the next scene. It's like it has no time to breathe, unlike the last movie where it really lets the emotion sink in. This movie does feel rushed, but it's very clearly just weak writing mostly. The most beloved aspect of this movie is the message. The first movie was about embracing yourself, and this one is like a hybrid of finding inner peace and also finding out who you are. Poe faces uncertainty, not knowing that he's adopted, and uncertainty becomes anguish. So the sheep tells him to let it flow and he finds inner peace just like that. It just isn't set up well. Poe as a character is just so much weaker than he was before. He has moments where he struggles, but because of how the movie is structured, most of the time he's just child appeasing funny guy. The plot of this movie is so dull. It's kind of like an adventure quest plot where the characters go to a city, fight, lose, fight, win. It almost feels inconsequential by the end. The movie almost has to come to a stop to have character moments, which for Po are all about his uncertainty of being adopted, which I guess uncertainty does directly relate to inner peace, but the actual inner peace that matters has to do with Shen killing his panda race. So in turn, that conflict almost gets resolved instantly, I'm not even joking. Inner peace is a good message that I still learn from even today, but it all comes down to execution, and I feel like there are a numerous amount of works that convey this message better. One being Kung Fu Panda 1 with Shifu. I think in a lot of ways this movie is just a shitty reflection of the original. Off the bat, this movie introduces destiny and flat out says that Shen will be defeated by Po. Like, it continuously keeps reminding us that Po will beat Shen. And the problem is that we really have no reason to believe that he can't. The reason that the first movie's destiny plot works so well is because Po is a fat, worthless panda. How the fuck could this dude beat Tai Lung? And then we experience this masterful story, and by the end, the victory feels earned. There are also a lot of moments in this movie where they use the same music from the last movie and it's implemented in a very similar way. You have this training montage and the journey montage. But here, it's kind of reflecting Shen and Po, but like they don't even know anything about each other yet. Why are we getting this fucking versus screen? In the first movie, Po and Tai Lung are two sides of the same coin, but the execution is so good that it doesn't even need to dwell on it. You have the dragon scroll scene versus Shifu guiding a drop of water. Obviously, by default, the dragon scroll scene is way more impactful, but it also helps that Shifu doesn't say, "This is one of Oogway's teachings, watch this." One more, you have two scenes of false victory with the group destroying the cannon and the group beating Tai Lung. I don't even need to say anything here. Every time I watch this movie, I just would rather be watching the first one. The only thing different is probably Shen. Shen is basically just an evil guy who wants to rule China. He does have a more personal connection to Po, but it doesn't really result in anything mind-blowing. But the biggest problem is that when you have a villain who's supposed to be terrifying, it is the dumbest idea to have a character constantly embarrass them. These first scenes with Shen in this go are almost exactly like this Megamind scene with Roxanne. I guess this does lead to a moment where Shen is like, "Fuck you, you can't even believe how evil I am." So then he says, "Free her." And like, what the fuck? That is the most friendly, unintimidating way of making someone leave. Like, I'm not saying kill her, but do something, you fuck. Kung Fu Panda 2 is simply nowhere near the first movie, where Kung Fu Panda 1 feels like every little decision is intentional. This one is simply not like that. When compared to greatness, it does fall flat, but it still is an okay DreamWorks movie. The animation is good, and there are some action scenes to keep things interesting. It's not something that will move you, but you also won't be mad that you spent time watching it. The fact that this movie is so beloved is very surprising to me. This truly is a fraud check movie. If someone calls this a masterpiece, you gotta question that. But again, it's not that bad and it has some good aspects. Scoring this movie, I am going to give this one a 5 out of 10. So,
my son is alive.
Fuck!